So just to kick things off and give a bit of background about the Create Place for Everyone project and how we went about it. So we started by forming a steering group of people from racialised communities working for locality members across England, and recognising that everybody has a role to play in racial justice, but we wanted to make sure that the lived experience of racial discrimination was right at the heart of the project. As Tony mentioned, we had expert support from New Ways, an anti-racist behaviour change consultancy that we've been working closely with, and they acted as a critical friend, provided us with training and helped facilitate some of the research, supported our analysis phase as well. We started then, in terms of the deep research, by conducting interviews with 15 locality members, representing a broad range of organisation types and contexts, all at different stages in their racial justice journey, to really make sure that we were kind of engaging with, speaking to the breadth of the locality membership across the country on this. We then honed in on 4 deep dive case study research areas where we work quite closely, kind of speaking to, staff, boards, service users, system partners, to really get a sense of the kind of depth of these questions in organisations. And then we finished by bringing those organisations together to do some facilitated peer networking so they could learn from each other and we could kind of investigate some of the different contexts that they were working in. And so throughout the research, we developed 5 research themes which helped us explore that relationship between place-based community organisations and racial justice. So I'll just give you a bit of a flavour of those 5 research themes, but there's lots of detail and insight on these in the full report. So the first one is about inequalities in public service provision. So understanding the cycles of exclusion whereby public services fail to adequately identify, meet the needs of racialised communities, and that understanding that community organisations play an essential role in addressing those stubborn inequalities. And the research kind of highlights 2 roles in particular. The first one is stepping in and filling those gaps in provision themselves. But then the second one is about the kind of more systems change role, so partnering with the public sector to shape a more equitable provision of services. And in the research, we highlight the issue of underreporting. So, for example, a local authority thinking that domestic violence kind of wasn't a particularly prevalent issue with a particular racialized community, but a local organisation being able to kind of show how that's to do with those issues not being reported rather than not existing, and then working to address them. So that's the first research theme. The second one is about how organisations go about meeting diverse community needs and highlighting, different approaches community organisations take, and thinking about some of the strengths and weaknesses from a racial justice perspective. So lots of community organisations will provide services which are universal and open to all, and there's very good reasons for doing that, kind of thinking about that broad sense of inclusion. Our doors are open to everyone, but also we need to recognise that approach can inadvertently reinforce inequalities, because those universal services tend to be designed in the image of the majority population. So equity can mean that a more targeted approach is needed, where you're proactively tailoring services to support specific racialized groups, and that can be necessary to avoid exclusion. And the report contains a case study of closing the gap in provision for South Asian and Muslim women who were among the least likely to participate in physical activity. Our third research theme is absolutely not a new one, about inequalities in funding, but what the research did was really kind of highlighted, reinforced, a very well-established picture that clearly all VCSE organisations, struggle for adequate funding. It's an incredibly difficult landscape out there, but embedded systemic racism means it's particularly acute for organisations who are led by and for racialised communities. So the research highlights that feeling of kind of not being valued by funders, of seeing an unfair share of that kind of, diminishing pots of funding going to often big national organisations kind of coming into the area, but also going to the larger, more established community anchor organisations locally. So there is lots of good practice kind of out there at the moment from funders, and we highlight that in the report and pull out some of the lessons. But it's also clear from the research that it's far from a universal picture. It's more kind of a few trailblazers leading the way rather than having fundamentally address some of those inequitable systems. So that's a key priority for us going forward. The fourth theme is about allyship among community organisations. So understanding that racial justice can't just be seen as the preserve of community organisations who are led by and for people from racialised communities. There's a crucial role for the multi-purpose community organisations who make up the bulk of the locality membership, and most of whom have predominantly white leadership teams. So this is about those organisations embedding anti-racism in their own activities, as well as providing kind of a wider sense of allyship across the network. And so the research highlights lots of good practice from white-led organisations responding to the needs of racialised and refugee communities, for example, but also a sense that it's kind of not going far enough to make racial justice an explicit part of that broader social justice mission. And there's a great case study in the report of how a community anchor organisation is seeking to do that. And then the fifth and final theme is about connection, understanding, and belonging within places. And this kind of really grew as a topic as we conducted the research over the past 18 months, as people can probably understand, given those issues which Tony highlighted at the start. So it recognises that community organisations are right in the eye of the storm of some of those most toxic divisions that we're experiencing at the moment, but also that community organisations have exactly the right qualities to be the key institutions for bringing us back together. But it's incredibly difficult work and not something that organisations can be kind of expected to shoulder the burden on their own. So there's examples in there of how organisations are countering prejudice and division, how we can go further, and that's kind of a real key focus for our support offer. So those are our kind of research themes headlines. What we then did to try and bring some shape to this in terms of a kind of practical action plan is we created a typology of community organisations across the locality network. So very much not attempting to be neat or definitive here. That's neither possible nor desirable, but recognising that organisations are working in different contexts. And so what this typology did was it helped us make sure that we were including the full breadth of the locality membership in the research activities, but also helping us tailor our support programme. So the broad three-part typology is community organisations who are working in a place-based way, but they're led by and set up for racialised groups in that neighbourhood. The second part of the typology is the more kind of generalist, multi-purpose community organisations working in a place-based way, but working in very diverse, often predominantly racialised neighbourhoods. And then the third part of the typology is those, again, generalist, multi-purpose community organisations who are working in predominantly white British neighbourhoods. So that typology kind of has helped inform our support offer. We've also drawn out three key principles that really sit across that support offer and help kind of give shape to it, kind of taken from those research findings. The first is about the importance of strategic headspace to enable a culture of anti-racism. So it's incredibly difficult kind of work landscape for working in. We know just getting through the day, the week is kind of really difficult. There's so much firefighting, crisis provision for locality members. So having the headspace for that kind of those bigger, kind of more strategic long-term shifts is really hard. So that's got to be an important principle. The second is about using racial justice as a lens through which we see community development work. So this isn't about creating a whole kind of new set of services and activities. It's about kind of using racial justice as a lens for how we manage buildings, provide services. And the third thing is about, from a locality perspective, we need to kind of do different things to support different members in different ways. And there are different aspects of our support offer that are going to be, helpful in different ways across that typology. So that's helped us shape the Creating Places for Everyone programme that we set out in the report. And it really tries to think quite precisely about how we can deploy the full range of what we do at Locality. So from our influencing work, our practical support with members, our peer networking opportunities, how that can be deployed best across that three-part typology. And it includes things that we can and will do using our existing resources, so kind of really harnessing our kind of core member support offer, but also kind of things that we're committing to go out and raise the external funding to enable us to provide, and that's a key priority for us. So lots of detail about this in the report. I'll just give you the quick overview of some of the different aspects. So there's direct support, so how we, our regional services team who work directly with members, how we can, get the external funding to mean that they can be providing tailored support to members across our typology, and that offer being very much co-designed, co-delivered with locality members. We've got peer learning, which Tony mentioned at the top. So using in line with our existing support package, we're 3 peer networking groups which reflect that 3-part typology. So continuing to run and evolve our existing Leaders of Colour group, also creating 2 new groups. So one which is about embedding anti-racism, so really kind of thinking about the second part of that typology, how organisations working in very diverse communities can really use racial justice as that lens. But then also another group which is really focused on bridge building, community cohesion, like particularly in some of those neighbourhoods where there's particularly kind of toxic division, so how we provide some kind of peer learning space there. So there'll be kind of information coming out to you about how to express interest and join those groups, and we really hope that will be a useful space for members. And then the third and final part of this is a kind of Creating Places for Everyone campaign. So this will be thinking about how we use our platform, our influence to create that more supportive external environment for this work to happen in very difficult conditions locally. So this is about engaging members and creating allyship across the network, but also about things like, particularly addressing those inequities in funding systems. And we are going to be hosting a roundtable with lots of the key funders, working with Esme Fairbairn Foundation to share the findings from the report. So I'll finish just by highlighting what Tony mentioned about the membership charters. So this is going to be a kind of key focus for us over the next few months to make sure that all new organisations who are joining Locality are signing up to that principled stance, but also asking existing members to recommit to it as part of this piece of work. So I hope that's been a useful overview. As I said, lots more detail in the report about it all.